It's me, your friendly haunt, Max. It looks like I'm dead. But I won't let that get me down. My mortal life may now be behind me, but I'm not done working. After all, the spooky season is upon us, and I've taken upon myself to haunt you all with my 31 Days of Maxtober. Throughout October, I will be posting a new mini-review for all kinds of Halloween movies and TV specials. Some of these I've seen before, but a lot of them I will have seen for the first time. So let's stop wasting time and get on to today's review. Deadly Friend. What an absolutely obscure movie for this month. I actually have a little bit of history going into this one. Remember when I did my top 10 favorite Halloween movies? No? Okay. Well, I struggled to come up with 10 back then, so I just kind of looked up movies that took place on Halloween and I found this little gem. Directed by Wes Craven himself, the man who created Freddy Krueger and is therefore responsible for my interest in horror. Based on the trailer, it seemed like a movie about a girl with crazy powers wreaking havoc on a town. These two factors got me very interested, and so I watched the movie. It did not make it onto my top 10. So I just wound up watching this movie for nothing. Until now! I finally have a decent excuse to share my opinions on this movie. Granted, I could have reviewed this movie at any time, but only now do I care again. Anyways, you might be thinking that I just don't like this movie based on how I'm talking about it so far, but it's not as simple as all that. There are a few things here that I enjoy, but I should first fill you in on what this movie is all about. A boy named Paul is a scientific genius who has created artificial life in the form of his wacky robot BB. Yep, this is actually a robot movie. It has nothing to do with the supernatural. That robot is in fact voiced by Charles Fleischer, who voiced Roger Rabbit. So the horror comes in when Paul's next door neighbor, Samantha, gets killed by her abusive father, and so Paul puts the chip that makes BB alive into Sam's brain, and things go horribly wrong. I'll start off by saying that this movie did effectively get me to care about its characters. I feel so bad for Samantha. She gets brought back to life, but only with small parts of her brain still active, while the rest of it is just replaced with BB's brain, so she's not really herself anymore. In fact, she's mostly just BB, especially as the film goes on. She was incredibly likable, so it sucked to see her get killed by her horrible dad. Though, as a robot girl, Sam is pretty hilarious. I can't tell how intentional that is, but her bug eyes and extended arms were funny to me, and I liked seeing her take revenge on the people that wronged both her and BB. That dad dying especially is very cathartic. I also feel really bad for Paul, who is in anguish over Sam's death and tries everything he can to save her, but he's ultimately left with a being that is not really Sam anymore. We see Paul pretty much ruin his other relationships over this, and it's kind of a bummer. I actually think this movie may be too much of a bummer at times, since it's pretty clear that Sam will never be whole again, and her unnecessary death will never truly be undone. So you're pretty much just waiting to see Paul crumble, and that's not a great feeling. But this movie's not all doom and gloom. It does have a true 80s horror movie inside of it. Like this insane kill where Sam destroys an old lady's head with a basketball. Damn! There are also like 2 nightmare sequences, which I can only assume are homages to A Nightmare on Elm Street, because they otherwise do not fit in here at all. Also, Sam's dad is pretty terrifying in this, so there is at least effective horror. But you may be wondering, how is this a Halloween movie? There's one scene where it's Halloween night! I'll allow it! You know, there's also one scene where it's briefly Thanksgiving, so according to my backwards-ass rules, this is also a Thanksgiving movie. I actually really like the score in this film. There are a couple of really good tracks that kind of help sell the emotional tone throughout, and I do think this movie can get pretty emotional. But as I said, it maybe becomes too much of a downer for me to enjoy, especially when we get to the ending. Towards the end, it actually looks like Sam is sort of getting her mind back, but that's when the police shoot her. It's pretty frustrating, especially when it leads to the whammy ending of Sam becoming a full robot and killing Paul? Come on, what the fuck is that? Maybe it's another out-of-place nightmare? But that's not confirmed, so I just kinda have to accept it like this. I had my fun with this movie, but I don't think it's one I'm going to rewatch very often. But if my description of it interests you, there's no harm in checking it out. Alright, Halloween Ends. You're asking for it. Enough time has passed since I saw this in theaters, and I've had plenty of time to mull things over. I, like many of you, was expecting the conclusion of a trilogy walking into this one. Halloween 2018 was pretty good, so I was willing to see this timeline through. Then Halloween Kills came out, and I kinda hated it. It's a very stupid movie, with some of the dumbest victims I've seen so far. But that has also led to me growing an ironic enjoyment of it. Still, I was willing to give Halloween Ends a fair chance. Maybe Halloween Kills sucked so bad because they just wanted to save all the good stuff for the last entry of the trilogy. That's all! It's not easy being the middle child. Halloween Ends will surely give us what we really want. Well, if you really wanted to see the twisted tale of Corey Cunningham, you're in luck. I, on the other hand, was expecting a Michael Myers movie! Oh god. This is a trilogy, for God's sake! You can't take a detour now! I should have known something was up when they flaunted the Season of the Witch font in the beginning. Yes, it turns out Halloween Ends is a bit different. It's not like your other Halloween movies. This time, they'll save Michael for the 40-minute mark and give us time to learn all about Corey Cunningham. I'll be honest, I don't hate Corey. In fact, he's one of the more interesting human characters in this franchise to me. I feel bad for him. I like seeing him become evil. He works for me. But unfortunately, he spends most of this movie trying to get into a relationship with Allison, and their love story is agonizing. That should not have been the focus. Laurie Strode returns, and now that she's not in the hospital, she can be a badass again, and try to kill Michael! Nah, let's say she gave up. Sure, she's been paranoid for decades about Michael escaping, and all of her fears came true, resulting in her daughter being killed, and sure, Michael is still out there, having never been caught, but that kind of thinking isn't healthy! Now seems like a good time to let go of the past. Laurie and Corey have some conflict, but it all ties back into the love story of Allison, so I didn't care. Things get interesting when Michael finally comes into play. But when I say interesting, I really mean interesting. With a bit of sass on that. I hate what happens to Michael. Let's get into it. For whatever reason, he supernaturally transfers his evil onto Corey and makes him his trusted sidekick. I guess when you're as old as Michael, you gotta know when to pass on the torch. Even if passing the torch means Corey has the balls to kick Michael's ass and steal his mask. God damn it, why is Michael such a loser in this movie? I don't get it. He was on his A game at the end of Kills. Why did he stop killing after that? Is it because they destroyed his house? He's got nothing to fight for anymore? I hate this. It was bad enough getting none of the shape. Now all we've got is the fraud! You're a fraud, Michael Myers! You might think I'm happy that Michael gets to kill Corey, but I'm not. Corey is the one who really killed Corey. Michael just finished the job on him. As far as I'm concerned, a non-injured Corey would still be capable of whooping Michael's ass. Anyways, Michael once again fails to kill a normal person, and Laurie realizes he was really just a man this whole time. A man who grows more powerful when he kills and can transfer his evil onto other people. Yeah, sure, whatever. If you really believed that, you wouldn't have done the biggest double tap I've ever seen by shoving Michael into a grinder. That'll do it! Yeah, this sucked. I still don't like this movie. I know some people appreciate how different it is from the other Halloween movies, but I don't think it replaces the format with anything better. I don't know if this is worse than Halloween Resurrection, but the fact that I'm even discussing that potential pretty much tells you everything you need to know. Freddys, Tricks, and Treats! Ooh! You must know by now that I'm a huge Fred head. He's always fighting Chucky for the top spot of my favorite horror villain, and I think the Nightmare movies are consistently entertaining and creative. Even the lesser movies in that franchise will have something really cool and fun in it. Also, Nightmare on Elm Street was the first horror movie I ever saw. So yeah, you can consider me a fan. Lately, I've become kind of obsessed with all the bonus Elm Street material out there. This franchise was advertised. Freddy had video games, novels, his own album, tons of strange commercials, a hotline where you call Freddy, and most importantly, his own anthology TV show that ran for 2 seasons. I actually think this show captures the energy of the movies in most of its episodes, with a lean towards the style of Elm Street's 4 and 5, since it's incredibly corny. Just how I like it! But I'm not here to spew off about the entire show. I'm here to look at an episode that takes place on Halloween! Oh, I forgot to specify that in my first video. Every special and movie I'm covering has to have Halloween in it. At least at some point. We're looking for Halloween vibes, not general horror vibes. Anyways, Freddy's Tricks and Treats follows a college girl named Marcia, who's just about had it with Springwood's obsession with Halloween. Everyone's trying to get her to come hang out, but she would rather study for her upcoming anatomy test. But she soon finds out that Springwood's affinity for Halloween is because there are urban legends of a ghost in their town, which makes the season extra scary. Maybe even too scary. It's Freddy. It's Freddy Krueger. He's the ghost. And he isn't just some legend. He's real. I'm glad this episode actually has Freddy as the villain. While Freddy does have plenty of appearances in this show, most of the plots are unrelated to him, or are only related to him because he may have possibly set things into motion. Other than that, he's just used for the wraparound segments. So seeing him as our main villain here is nice! I love Freddy's one-liners in this episode, and he gets up to a lot of his classic tricks. We get a good amount of scenes with him too. It's not like they only have him here once. But still, he is not the focus. Marcia is. And she's actually a pretty likable lead. With 40 minutes dedicated to her story, we get to know what makes her tick. And I feel really bad for her when Freddy uses her sour relationship with her grandma against her. At first, I was annoyed with her boyfriend Mark, since he was so insistent on making Marcia be more sociable and go to this big Halloween party. I just thought that was none of his business. Marcia doesn't need to go to a party if she doesn't want to. But then the twist came in, which genuinely caught me off guard. They reveal that Mark was never real. Marcia just imagined him because she was lonely and couldn't muster up the courage to ask anyone out because of the trauma her grandmother gave her. Once she gets past that trauma, he fades away, and we're just left with Marcia sobbing in a way that actually got me to feel something. I went in this for the goofs! I didn't expect to actually care about the characters! I have to give the episode props for that. Now Mark's behavior makes a lot more sense to me. Mark was just the part of herself that hated how poor her social life was, and his insistence that she go make friends was really her telling herself that. It's good stuff. Anyways, that was just the first half. The second half focuses on this jackass named Zach, who's experimenting on Marcia now because he has this device that can see into her dreams? I don't know, he comes off as a fucking predator, watching her wet dreams and shit. I hated this guy. He was so manipulative of Marcia, who I had already come to really like, so I was just mad watching him. He finds out that Marcia is having Freddy dreams, and just keeps trying to make things worse for her until her dreams reveal some amazing scientific discovery. He even goes as far as to start choking Marcia, what the fuck? But then, oh god. I have never rooted for Freddy this hard before. He sees someone else is going for his kill and he does not like it. I was so happy to see that not only was Freddy killing Zach, but he had become Freddy's primary target and Marcia is allowed to live. That made me very happy. Anyways, while I really did like this episode, I'll be the first to admit that its writing was a little sloppy. I don't think the writers trusted the audience to understand what was going on, so occasionally there are these really forced lines of dialogue that spell everything out for you, and it never feels natural. But aside from those writing hiccups, I had a great time here. It really did feel like a condensed Elm Street movie, at least in the first half. That was definitely the better part of the episode, but we do get some fun stuff in the second half. Thanks for the treat, Freddy! The Haunting Hour! Don't think about it! Now, the actual show, R.L. Stine's The Haunting Hour, is a show that I really like. It's pretty much mature Goosebumps, with actually scary episodes that I enjoy. So, off the bat, this movie has something to live up to. I'm expecting decent scares. Cassie Keller has just moved into town, and she's being picked on by the popular girls at school. But when she finds an ancient book in a creepy shop, she's given the chance to take revenge by summoning the evil thing? Yeah, that's what it's called. Well, the monster in this movie actually looks pretty rad. I like the whole thing about it growing 2 heads and only being summoned if you think about it. That's your title right there! The effects are great. It's all practical. I like this thing. It's not scary to me, but I'm sure it was scary for children watching it. Also, goddamn Tobin Bell is in here as a mysterious shopkeeper! Hell yeah! I pop off whenever I see Tobin Bell in something. I also recognized Emily Osment from Hannah Montana, so there were familiar faces. The Halloween vibes in this movie are top tier. They go overboard on the decorations and I loved it. Pretty sick Halloween party too. This was really setting itself up as a movie that I was going to enjoy. It was. But then the characters started to get on my nerves. I'll at least keep us on a positive track before I lay into it by saying that I didn't mind the main character of Cassie, but of course I would find common ground with the one character that's obsessed with creepy stuff. She's got it pretty rough. New town, new school, and her parents always take the side of her snotty piece of shit brother Max. I fucking hate Max, and I hate sharing his name. I hope this doesn't become a theme. I felt bad when Cassie got embarrassed in front of everyone by the popular girl Priscilla. I was rooting for that girl's death so hard. This is the Haunting Hour after all. These characters usually get to die. She did not. I mean, she almost dies to the monster, but by the end of everything, she just seems mad that it happened, not scared. She gets off too easy, damn it! There was also this love interest for Cassie, a fella by the name of Sean. At first I thought he was based because he rebels against Priscilla, but then he decides to tell Cassie off for pranking her? Like, what? Did you want her to sit there and take the bullying? The movie actually decides that Cassie is the hidden villain because she likes to scare people. That is not well established. She scared Priscilla because she's horrible and humiliated her in front of everybody. And scares her brother because he's horrible and destroyed her DVD player. Her frights are done in retaliation for being messed with. If they wanted to run with this as her character arc, she should have been scaring innocent people. Motherfucking Tobin Bell gets on her ass about this too. It's her big mortal lesson. Oh, you like to scare people sometimes? I'm gonna kill your brother. Are we sure this isn't just John Kramer when he had more hair? This whole plotline takes over the film, and I was just so frustrated. It doesn't help that by this time in the movie, they've decided to add a lot more jokes, and they are god-awful. The acting starts to get worse. I don't know, man. This goes to shit. Priscilla drops the R slur. It all gets out of hand. This just doesn't feel like The Haunting Hour. That show usually has better writing than this. It's not all bad. Like I said, the monster is cool, but the writing ruins this whole thing for me. I'm done thinking about this fucking movie. Moving on. Do you guys remember what I said in my Deadly Friend review? About how I watched that movie for the sake of a top 10 video I was doing, but didn't like it enough to actually have it on my top 10? Well, it's got a sibling! I also watched the 1985 Jim Carrey classic, Once Bitten. But not being on my top 10 doesn't mean I don't like the movie. Let's get into it. The Countess is a 400-year-old vampire that must suck the blood of a virgin 3 times before Halloween, or else she'll lose her immortality. Unfortunately, this task has become harder over the years, since having sex is cool, and it seems like she's out of luck. But oh look, Jim Carrey doesn't look like he's had sex. He'll have to do. If the plot synopsis didn't give it away, this is an 80s sex comedy. As with most 80s sex comedies, this really doesn't hold up to today's standards. It's pretty sexist, homophobic, even a little transphobic, but I sort of expected that. It is at least not as egregious as something like Porky's, Jesus Christ. Still, it hinders my enjoyment of this movie. I can't really ignore it. But hey, Jim Carrey's in this thing, and he does a pretty good job with what he's given. This is before his successful year in 1994, so he plays the straight man in this. And he actually plays the straight man pretty well. And there are a few bits that call for him to be more exaggerated, which he predictably nails. I think it's fascinating that I liked him in this movie, because the way the character is actually written, Mark is an asshole. He's not very understanding of Robin not wanting to have sex with him yet, since they're both virgins. He's kinda mean about it. And he casually decides he wants to cheat on her just so he can have sex and there won't be any more pressure between them. Honestly, I think if you remove the part about him having a girlfriend, this character works better. It would be more relatable if he wanted to have sex just because he's a virgin. Having him do it to make things less awkward with his girlfriend is a more specific issue and makes him a jerk. Or just have him cheating on Robin taken more seriously. So this could turn into the film version of Catherine, where he's trying to decide if he wants to stick with the normal girl or get with the strange supernatural girl. But this movie is pretty low stakes, and Mark manages to get Robin to forgive him shockingly fast. Still, Jim Carrey manages to make him likable. I can't really explain that beyond me just liking Jim Carrey and finding him to be charming in most of his roles. Even when his character is doing bad things, he at least seems to regret his actions. Seeing him become a vampire is fun, and leads to a few trippy dream sequences that I enjoyed. The main villain, the Countess, is pretty good too. She has her own seductive charm that's alluring and is occasionally funny. Her shoving an old lady and a nun caught me off guard. I'll tell you who isn't occasionally funny. Mark's two friends! Fuck those guys! They are the most constant reminders that this is a sex comedy, and most of the problematic shit comes courtesy of them. The most Halloween part of all of this is the big Halloween party they go to. Wait, they can just have someone dressed as Darth Vader? This whole scene is probably the best in the movie, with the two girls fighting over Mark in a pretty fun dance scene that brings out the acting beast within Jim Carrey. They play some great 80s music here, and honestly, this whole movie is filled with great 80s music, especially the one actually called Once Bitten. The general 80s vibes are strong, and naturally draw me in a little because I love the style of these older movies. I wasn't expecting this movie to be as funny as it was. I know it's a comedy, but usually sex comedies don't make me laugh as much, but there were a surprising amount of jokes here that actually worked.
Mark doesn't want you because you're mean and evil. He wants me because I'm nice and sweet and pure. So fuck off!
What can I say? I had a fun time here. I'm not gonna go and call this an underrated classic, because it has just about as much attention as it deserves. Jim Carrey is charming, there are a few good jokes, and some fun scenes. If you can look past all of the elements that have aged poorly, and I can completely understand if you can't, I think you'll find a fun time. If you know me, you probably already know that I'm a huge fan of Beetlejuice, both the character and the franchise as a whole. In fact, the Bee-Man is one of my favorite characters in general. I've always liked how much fun he had being scary, taking personal pride in his ability to scare others. He's consistently funny, and there are 3 versions of him, all with different qualities that make me like him in different ways. And in most incarnations, he has a few redeemable qualities that make him not all bad, which is the kind of complexity I like in my characters. I'd say the cartoon's Beetlejuice is the most redeemable, while movie Beetlejuice is the furthest from that. Musical Beetlejuice fits right in the middle there. But we're bringing focus onto the Beetlejuice cartoon today. Because, in a cartoon filled with spooky adventures, of course they would eventually make a Halloween episode. In this episode, Lydia's rival at school, Claire, is hosting a Halloween party, but didn't invite Lydia or her friends. So, to show her up, she decides to host her own Halloween party and invite everyone. Beetlejuice catches wind of things, and shenanigans ensue. It's a pretty basic plot for an episode of this show, but I think it's handled well with some good jokes and fun monster designs. It's also a good showing of how different Beetlejuice's relationship with Lydia is in this cartoon. In the movie, while they do seem to understand each other, they aren't friends. In contrast, their friendship is very wholesome in this cartoon. Here, Beetlejuice and Lydia are friends through a shared love of creepy kooky shit. And Lydia is Beetlejuice's only real friend, so he's very loyal to her. It's great! I think the Beetlejuice musical even taps into this friendship during their song, That Beautiful Sound, which is great, by the way. Check out that musical, it rocks. Back on topic, Beetlejuice's characterization in general is something I enjoy about this show. He's friendly, but he isn't soft. He's still selfish, greedy, and likes to scare people. In fact, Beetlejuice originally intends to mock the Halloween party Lydia's throwing. But when he sees how stressed Lydia has become over the situation, he tries his best to make her party memorable. But in true Beetlejuice fashion, he makes things far too chaotic by unleashing monsters from the Netherworld to liven things up. I like the section towards the end when Lydia and Beetlejuice have to put the monsters back in the can they came from, and I also liked a lot of the gags in Beetlejuice's party, with a special note going towards the bowl of punch that just beats the shit out of you. Something else I noticed here, Lydia's parents play a larger role in this episode than they usually do in this cartoon. They're usually pretty sidelined. I liked seeing Delia do more. She was already pretty animated in the movie, and I liked her characterization in this show. There isn't too much else I can say about this episode. I like the monster designs, Beetlejuice is lovable, it's a good time! Detective Conan, the Bride of Halloween! Look at that! We're mixing things up! Today we've got an anime movie based on a popular long-running franchise known as Case Closed. My friend Ollie is super into this series, and as such, I've been exposed to a few bits of Conan media. All you really need to know is that this detective got himself into a hairy situation when this evil organization gave him enough drugs to turn him into a kid. So, the show's about this grown man solving mysteries while in the body of a child. He also pals around with Ron and her father Kogoro, who usually takes credit for Conan's work. Oh, and there's this girl named Ai, who invented the poison that turns you young, but she drank it to kill herself, and instead she woke up as a child also. She's with the gang too. You gotta know this stuff before going into the movie, it's important. But if you didn't know this already, they've got a helpful recap at the start. Anyways, let's get into this movie. For this case, the hunt is on to uncover the identity of a serial bomber under the alias of Plamia. This villain has killed plenty already, and now seems to be targeting 4 police officers who thwarted their plans in the past. Can Conan crack the case before more innocents die? What do you think? I don't think they're gonna kill their whole cast in this one-off Halloween movie. Just a hunch. But anyways, I had a good time with this movie. The whole case was pretty engaging, even though I found myself getting confused at a few points. I ultimately understood everything by the end, but it took a bit. I don't know if Ray is a reoccurring character in the show, but from what I saw of him here, he was my favorite. I liked his attitude and how he was a few steps ahead of the villain the whole time. It was great. I also liked Matsuda, but we only ever get to see him in flashbacks and Furu Takagi's portrayal of him. Still, that kind of confidence is always cool to me in detective shows like this. Conan himself is great. I liked seeing him piece together the crime, and seeing him get out of that exploding room was fun. The reveal of this big, pumpkin-headed cult of people who also want to take down Plamia was cool, even though a lot of their dialogue was in Russian, and the only subtitles I got were in Japanese! I was so lost when they were talking! Mother of mercy, I can't read Japanese! This movie had decent Halloween vibes. I liked the spooky purple fire, the decorative pumpkins turning out to be tools for a bomb, and the entire intro has a fun, spooky aesthetic. They did good in that department. I think my only issue with this movie is that I think the villain could have been better. First of all, I should have guessed that the bride they were protecting at the start of this would turn out to be the villain. The movie is called The Bride of Halloween. How did I not immediately guess that? Anyways, after she gets revealed, she's pretty much a generic monologuing villain who wasn't as interesting as I thought she would be. But while I didn't initially predict who the villain was going to be, I did predict that they would use the giant inflatable soccer ball to save the day! Yeah! If you set up a giant inflatable soccer ball that you can shoot out of your belt in the first act, it had better show up in the third act. Anyways, this was a fun time! I'd like to watch more Conan material, but I also know it's a huge franchise, so maybe just watching the occasional movie is how I'll go about it for now. If you want to follow a fun, spooky mystery this October, I'd say give this one a shot. Night of the Demons, alright! A true 80s horror movie that happens to fall on Halloween. The kitty gloves are coming off. I had never seen this before, but was pretty much expecting an Evil Dead knockoff, and that is sort of what I got. A few teenagers decide to spend Halloween at this haunted funeral parlor. But after a seance goes wrong, they unleash an evil demon that picks them off one by one. The demon itself is pretty cool. We get to see its true self, and it has a bit of a personality, mocking the survivors over the course of the movie. The demonic crap that goes on in this movie has a comedic edge to it that I enjoyed. We've got an incredible flying arm! And there's this gag where someone dies next to a tombstone which reads, "Died tonight," and I loved that. There's also a lot of strange scenes in this movie. Strangest of all is when this motherfucker Stooge just teleports on screen, acting like he didn't just teleport. At this point, he has not been possessed, so why is he so chill about it? Maybe he could always teleport. He has superpowers and none of his friends knew it. Also, this movie has a gratuitous amount of nudity in it, with the strangest example being when a girl shoves lipstick into her nipple? What the fuck? You can't even really see it, I'm censoring it, but I'm doing you a favor. This is haunting. The demonically possessed versions of the characters are pretty fun, and are a major step up from the characters as they were. Almost everyone here is a complete asshole, and I was rooting for their deaths. I'm usually not into movies like that, because I want to root for the characters we're stuck with until the monsters arrive. If I hate the characters, then there's a lot of the film where I'm just annoyed watching them, and that's not much for entertainment. In this movie's case though, two characters eventually start to develop into more likable ones that I can root for. First there's Sal. He was kinda cool. He came to the party because he was interested in this girl who moved on from him, but he's quick to see that weird shit is happening, and he attempts to comfort the people who are scared and try to escape with them. He's the closest we've got to a hero in all of this, and I kinda like his sarcastic attitude. He also dies trying to save somebody, so let's hear it for the GOAT! And I also liked Roger. He was pretty much a coward the whole time, only looking out for himself, but I felt genuinely bad for him, and he does come through in the end after he's already made it to safety, but returns just in time to save our final girl, Judy. He overcomes his fears, I liked it, and this character actually gets to live. Still, these aren't really the deepest characters to follow, and the plot just boils down to demons are killing everyone. It's not very exciting if you've seen these types of movies before. But hey, this movie has a great set, some interesting shots, and a few pretty good kills. And if that's all you need in a horror movie, you'll be satisfied here. I don't think that I would rewatch this again, but I can totally understand if this is something you're into. It was a trashy 80s horror film, and that's all it set out to be. Check it out if you dare. Goosebumps! I was obsessed with Goosebumps in my developing days. This was just the kind of fun horror that would shape me up to become the horror fan I am now. I have a lot of respect and reverence for this franchise for all it's done to shape me. I watched damn near every episode of the TV show and had a huge collection of the books. It's all very corny and hardly ever actually scary, but it's just the kind of spooky fun that I adore. And today we get to examine my favorite story in Goosebumps, as it correlates strongly with Halloween: The Haunted Mask. This episode introduces Carly Beth, a girl who is easily frightened and is constantly tormented by the people around her, especially those two punks, Chuck and Steve. But this year, it's going to be different. This year, Carly Beth is going to be scary, and Chuck and Steve will wish they had never met her. This is just an all-timer. I've loved this episode since I was a kid, and I love it just the same today. Amongst the other Goosebumps episodes, I'd say this one has aged the best. First off, I think Carly Beth is a very sympathetic character, and the actress Catherine Long does a great job portraying the character, especially in her sadder moments. Those really hit hard. I really felt bad seeing how many people picked on her for being easily frightened, as someone who was also easily frightened as a child. I sensed a kindred spirit in her, and that made it all the more satisfying when Carly puts on the haunted mask and gets her revenge. And I love seeing Carly rebel and become a fucking gremlin out on the streets. She brings an infectious energy like this. She's fucking crazy.
Yeah, I'm crazy, alright, I'm crazy!
I was pretty much completely on her side for a bit, until she started to become more cruel, slowly becoming more like Chuck and Steve. And I really liked that gradual shift, and how her innocence manifests in the plaster head that her mother made for her. Carly's mother is so nice in this, it is very sweet. I hate the little brother though, I hope he suffocated in that mask.
Gotcha, gotcha, gotcha!
Oh my god! Gotcha, gotcha, gotcha! So that's where I got it! I've been quoting that for years and I had no idea where it came from. Now it's finally been unearthed. He's also a terrible actor, but he's a kid, so whatever. Anyways, Carly's eventual revenge on Chuck and Steve is great, with Carly scaring the hell out of them and demanding an apology. Seeing them break down is very satisfying after all the shit they pulled. And then it shifts into my favorite scare in the episode, when Carly's plaster head comes to life and begs for help. Great stuff. The second best scare is definitely those floating heads though, that rules. The whole lore with those masks and the shopkeeper is interesting to me, and I kinda wish we got to learn a little more about the guy. Though I haven't read every Haunted Mask book, maybe they do get into it. Speaking of the titular Haunted Mask, it rules. It's a great spooky design brought perfectly to life in this episode. I love how the mask gradually attaches itself to Carly's face and even changes her eye color. Then eventually the teeth start to actually move when Carly speaks and the skin starts to sweat. It's so cool! And this whole episode ends on a very wholesome note, when Carly realizes that the plaster head her mother made for her was the true symbol of love that she needed to ward off the other masks, and finally take her mask off. Her coming home to her mother is just a nice moment. This episode actually manages to reach me on an emotional level, which is rare for this show. That's probably why I hold it in such high regard as my favorite episode. And, you know, the episode also has perfect Halloween vibes. It brings me to a place of actually trick-or-treating when I was younger. It's very nostalgic. So, if you're looking for those nostalgic Halloween vibes, definitely add this to the list. Ginger Snaps. Bridget and Ginger Fitzgerald are social outcasts obsessed with death. They only have each other in this world, and their relationship is about to be tested after Ginger is attacked by a werewolf and slowly begins to transform into one herself. Can these sisters find a cure? Does Ginger even want a cure? And will their relationship survive? Yes, no, and no. I didn't know a ton about this movie before watching it for this video. All I knew was it was a werewolf movie with strong feminist themes, so I was expecting something in a similar vein to The Craft or Jennifer's Body. I didn't quite like it as much as those two films, but I had a decent time here. For one, I like the vibes. This was made in the year 2000, and it shows in the editing. It made me nostalgic. I also really liked how this movie feels like fall leading up to Halloween. The holiday isn't actually that important to the movie, but it still felt in the setting. More importantly, I liked a lot of the characters in this movie. Bridget was a good protagonist. I liked how conflicted she was on how to deal with her sister's descent into madness. Most protagonists wouldn't keep helping their sister once they've already killed multiple people, but she is committed to saving her despite her crimes. You don't fuck with family! That's definitely true for the mother, who finds out about everything and immediately decides to cover up for them and plans to burn their house down and run away, also abandoning her husband in the process. That's dedication! Then there's Ginger, who starts to teeter into becoming unlikable as the film goes on, but when she starts to embrace full-on villainy, I start to really like her. She's actually pretty menacing in a few scenes, and I liked how her werewolf transformation is gradual. Unlike most werewolf stories, this transformation acts like a virus, and when the transformation is complete, it's permanent. Or at least that's what I gathered from this movie. I might be off the mark on how it works. Apparently, this movie has sequels, so I guess I gotta check those out at some point. The last character I wanted to talk about was Sam. He was probably my favorite. A few of the other characters kept setting him up to be a villain, with them claiming that he was only helping Bridget so he could sleep with her, but that turned out to be untrue. He was just genuinely trying his best to help save Ginger and find a cure for her condition. And he successfully made the cure. I thought it was cool how he kept sticking his neck out for them just because he cared, because his sarcastic attitude would make you think he doesn't care about anything. I'm so bummed that he died. That was so unfair! Honestly, the whole movie kind of turns out to be a bummer by the end of it all. Bridget has a cure for Ginger, but in her werewolf state, things get out of hand and she just ends up impaling her with a knife and Ginger dies. With how much effort was put in to try and save Ginger, it's sad that it was all for naught and the sisters have to part ways. Also, is Bridget gonna cure herself or what? The movie ends so suddenly. I don't know if she decided to stay a werewolf or not. And where did the mother go? She kind of left the movie when she went into the party looking for them. We needed an epilogue or something. Anyways, this is a pretty good movie. It's pretty gory if you're looking for that, and I liked the bond between the sisters that drives this whole thing. And, thinking about it, I kind of like that it ends on a dour note. We can't always have happy endings. If I've made this movie sound enticing to you, don't hesitate to check it out. Terrifier 2 was an interesting case for me. I hadn't heard of this franchise until this movie was coming out in theaters, and people were raving about how it was one of the scariest horror movies ever. And, based on everything I heard about what goes on in it, and everything that went on in the earlier films, I actually bought into it. To the point that I was actually a little scared to go watch it in theaters. So, I didn't. It was so strange to me. I haven't been scared to see a horror movie since I was a kid, but the mystique around this movie threatened me. Of course, eventually I did decide to just watch all the Terrifier movies, and since I knew what I was getting into, the fear factor was lessened. But now that I'm coming back to Terrifier 2 in preparation for the third film, which is coming out today, by the way, what do I think? Now that I'm less afraid, does this movie have anything else to offer me? Actually, yes. First off, Art the Clown is a legend. I wasn't so sure before, but after this movie, I think he has truly cemented himself as a horror icon. He is just so fucking funny in this movie, assuming you have a sick sense of humor like me. Seeing him butt-ass naked in a laundromat while playing patty cake with an invisible girl is hilarious. I love the whole glasses bit, and the comedic timing on that horn scene is immaculate. David Howard Thornton's acting really brings Art to life, and makes him a lot of fun to watch. I especially liked whenever something would get him to break character. Seeing him get genuinely mad was great, and I really liked how, even though I thought he was funny, he was still incredibly menacing. And look, I know I said the fear factor was lessened for me because I was prepared for the worst, but Brooke's kill is the exception. This is horrendous, it just never lets up. I feel so bad for this woman. It's pretty effective horror to me. To add more salt to the wound, her mother comes home and has to see Art's work, which is just so fucking sad. We also get to see more supernatural elements to Art's character in this movie. I know some people hate the supernatural stuff and wish Art was just a human, but I love it. It leads to so many fun visuals and just engages me more. I've seen enough slasher movies try to keep things grounded, and I'm sick of it. Let's get creative again. That's why I'm glad that Art takes cues from Freddy Krueger, doing dream shit and clearly having a blast torturing people. That's icon shit right there. The whole clown cafe scene is gold, and comes with a real fucking earworm. I can't get that song out of my head. But okay, Art and the gore are well done here. That's not so much different from the other films. What separates this film from the others is its character work. This movie actually has well-written characters that I liked. Sienna and her brother Jonathan really bring this movie together. You can really tell how much they care about each other, even through their disagreements. They're always supporting each other, and that was wholesome to me. Having characters that I actually like means that I actually care about the plot. And unlike the other films, the plot actually goes somewhere. This is kind of why I don't like the original Terrifier. It definitely goes balls to the walls with gore, and Art is pretty entertaining there, but there's almost no story to tie things together. I only barely root for the humans because I don't want anyone to be on the opposite end of Art's torture, not because they're particularly likable or relatable, so I'm just not all that engaged in that movie. In contrast, I really wanted to see Sienna and Jonathan survive. And Sienna is actually a badass when she dons the angel armor and takes out Art. I especially love Art's little nod of acknowledgement that he got beat. That is such a cool character decision, I love it. With good characters, now I can properly care about the lore and appreciate the thread of art even more. I really don't want him to kill these characters. There are stakes now. Aside from those characters, we also have Sienna's mom. She can sometimes feel too mean, but there are enough scenes that show how much she truly cares about her kids and just wants them to be safe. So I ultimately felt pretty bad when she died. I grew to dislike Sienna's friend who drugged her and then got mad when she was scared of the side effects, but even she has a few moments that show how much she actually cares about Sienna. That's something I like about this movie. The characters aren't one-dimensional stereotypes. They feel a little more realistic with their flaws. And finally, I just love the vibe and soundtrack of this movie. It definitely packs a lot of Halloween in here, it gets points for that, but also we have this great haunted maze they go through, and the clown cafe set is fun. It feels strange to call anything with this much gore fun, but what can I say? They mix their horror and comedy well. If the Terrifier franchise continues to go in this direction, I think we're all in for a good time. If you can stomach the gore, I highly recommend watching Terrifier 2 this Halloween. I do not talk enough about how much I enjoy the show Frasier. Originally a spin-off of Cheers, Frasier sort of formed its own identity and became just as successful as that show, and it recently came back with new seasons. I only got into this show recently following the initial announcement of the reboot, and I'm very happy that I did, because it has quickly become one of my favorite shows. This show has mastered the art of the farce, with plenty of its best episodes involving a series of miscommunications that ultimately blow up by the end. Usually to the embarrassment of Frasier and his brother Niles. Very good show, highly recommend it. Anyways, for my purposes today, they did a few Halloween specials in their time, and I've decided to go over my favorite one, simply titled Halloween. Some context is needed if you haven't seen the show, so here's all the relevant information. At this point in the series, Frasier's producer Roz has gotten pregnant, but has only revealed this sensitive information to Frasier himself. Also, Niles is in love with Daphne, who is the housekeeper and physical therapist of Frasier's father, Martin, who lives with Frasier. I have said Frasier far too many times already. It's only going to get worse. But you're ready now. Here's what goes down in the Halloween special. As you may guess, it is indeed Halloween, and Niles is hosting a costume party at his house as a benefit for the Library Association, which in turn means that each guest has to dress up as a character from literature. But since Roz is pregnant and doesn't want anyone to know, Frasier has to be mindful of what he says. He is not. This is a perfect example of Frasier doing what it does best, and having a misunderstanding spiral out of control. And I think the best way to talk about this episode is to just simply go through the events. The entire misunderstanding is set up when Frasier and Daphne recount a trip they were on recently, where they both got drunk, which Niles is already paranoid about. And it's followed up by the two wearing costumes that pose them as husband and wife. So Niles is already kind of pissed off at that idea. At the actual party, Daphne believes Roz was in a car accident, but when she tells Frasier she knows why Roz is acting strange, he believes that Roz told her about being pregnant, so he inadvertently tells her secret. As Frasier and Daphne speak in private about Roz having a baby, Niles eavesdrops and assumes that it's Daphne who's pregnant, which makes him livid. And after Niles thinks that Frasier has gotten Daphne pregnant, he spends the rest of the episode walking around as a barely contained ball of rage trying to keep his composure, and it's hilarious. There are a lot of great jokes with Frasier being oblivious to what Niles thinks is going on, so he continues to flirt with women in front of Niles, while he continues to get more and more furious, thinking that he's cheating on Daphne. Niles finally confronts Frasier that he knows about the baby, saying he heard it from Daphne, which Frasier assumes means that she just couldn't keep the secret about Roz. But Roz hears Frasier arguing with Niles, and he gets busted for seemingly telling her secret to Niles, even though he does not actually know the secret yet. Things are going to get more convoluted from here. Frasier tries to explain to Roz how he accidentally told Daphne about Roz's pregnancy, but in doing so, Martin overhears it and another person knows the secret. Niles tells Martin that there's a baby on the way, but he says he already knows, prompting Niles to tell him that Frasier is the father. So now Martin thinks that Frasier is the father of Roz's child, while Niles believes that Frasier is the father of Daphne's child. The problem just keeps getting worse and worse until Niles finally decides to confront Frasier in front of everyone in the party. After Niles makes an ass of himself, Frasier clears up the misunderstanding and ends up announcing to everyone at the party that Roz is pregnant. The way they go about this incredibly chaotic plot is something to behold. Around every corner, there's a great joke having to do with what these characters do and do not know about what's going on, and it's superb. Frasier is filled with this kind of great humor, so if this seems up your alley, I recommend it. The Halloween vibes aren't especially strong in this one. It was just a means to get all of the characters together, but I cannot pass up the opportunity to talk about such a funny episode. I downloaded a ghost! Oh, fuck, what should I do? I didn't know this movie existed until right now, and I'm betting you didn't either. I found this in the deepest, darkest crevice of the Wikipedia page on Halloween movies. I've unearthed this little movie, and now it's time to see if I found a diamond or a basic bitch rock. Well, I found a movie that was exclusively for children. I don't know what I was expecting. The premise goes as such. A girl named Stella wants to make sure her haunted house is way better than her rich rivals, but she doesn't have any money. She's gonna need to download an actual ghost off the internet! How? Well, luckily for her, a man named Winston just tragically died to a bus moments ago. So she's able to summon him through this website. Okay, I know this movie is literally titled I Downloaded a Ghost. I already bought into the premise, I knew what I was getting into, but this doesn't make any fucking sense. Alright, whatever. We got ourselves a ghost, and he's even played by the same guy who does fucking Crocker! Let's go! Unfortunately, though, he happens to play the most annoying ghost I've ever seen in, well, anything, actually. His whole gimmick is that before he died, he wanted to be a stand-up comic, but he gets stage fright, and was always too nervous to actually put on a show. It's his unfinished business. But oh my god. They give him some of the worst, most cringe-inducing jokes I've ever heard in my life. But the other characters find him hilarious. Dude, Winston, you're so fucking funny, dude. You should do stand-up. Actually, thank God this fucker died before he went up on stage. He would have bombed so hard, it would have been embarrassing. But oh no, this movie ends with him doing open mic night in front of a bunch of kids. Oh fuck, why does he look like one of Casper's uncles? Spare me, please! It does not stop at Winston, folks. This movie is filled with bad jokes and pop culture references. The first scene is a direct reference to Scream, even. I don't know, I guess a few jokes worked, but I can assure you that it was never courtesy of Winston. Pretty much everyone else is funnier than him. Like these two goons that work for the main villain, they were pretty funny. It seemed like they were having a fun time in their roles. Stella had a few good one-liners. I don't know, I'm trying to find something good here. Stella's haunted house was alright. Nope, that didn't work. I'm gonna go back to the negatives. The plot, predictably, makes no sense. Beyond the downloading a ghost shit, which I've come to accept, I just don't understand why these characters do what they do. First off, why does Winston need Stella at all? He isn't tied to her. He can become visible if he wants, and he can grab objects. He could have found the stolen artifact himself, but then we wouldn't have shenanigans. Later on, they need to sneak into Winston's funeral and decide to give Stella a disguise so she can do it. Why? We have already established that Winston can transform his body and become visible to whoever he wants. He could have done it himself. It's a kid's movie. It's a kid's movie. I shouldn't get this upset. It doesn't matter that they follow every cliche in the book, down to the forced falling out between the main characters and the shitty villain revealing his plan in front of everyone. It's all good. The effects are god-awful, but it's for kids. It's fine. No, alright, you get it. This movie sucks. You should by no means watch it this Halloween. This will be the first movie so far that I'm giving my patented Galaxy Video Max 0 stars! Get out of here! Go somewhere else to make your fucking references to Scream! Wait a minute.
Say that again?
Scream 6! Fuck yeah! I knew I downloaded a ghost would eventually lead me to something good. I love the Scream movies. It's one of the most consistent horror franchises out there in terms of quality. Its only real hiccup being the third movie, but I've seen some people come around to liking that one even. Scream 6 is the latest of these movies, and they do something different by setting the movie in Manhattan. And, for today's purposes, it also takes place on Halloween. So, I felt like talking about it. After last year's massacre, a popular theory has arisen that Sam was the true mastermind behind the killings, and now it seems like a new Ghostface has arrived to kill her for it, as well as everyone that gets in their way. This is just another really solid entry in the franchise. It somehow continues to subvert expectations even when everyone is expecting that from them, and there are a lot of really cool scenes with Ghostface in here. The whole bodega scene is great, and the subway scene is very tense. They actually use Halloween pretty well there, since tons of people are dressed like Ghostface and we don't actually know if the killer is on the subway with them or not. It's great! I also really like the subversive opening kill. First of all, I love Samara Weaving. I'm so happy she's here, and I'm so bummed that she gets killed immediately. But we all expected that. Scream loves to kill off actors who are predicted to have a larger role in the actual movie. It's a classic move. But they manage to subvert expectations when we start to follow Ghostface after the opening kill. Typically, we move right into the title after that, but this time we actually get to see who Ghostface is, how he blends into the group of friends in this movie, and we follow him home. Only for him to get killed off by a separate Ghostface. That was awesome. We've never seen a Ghostface target another Ghostface. I'm saying that name too many times. I love how he froze his words back into his face, and it was very satisfying to see that guy go down after he killed Laura. I guess on the topic of Ghostface, I'll say that, as expected, Roger L. Jackson is excellent in the role, and he's given a lot of cool things to say. Anytime we hear Ghostface in this movie, I love it. The killers that are actually revealed here are pretty lame though. These are some low-tier killers. I like the idea of a family doing the killings together, and having them try to avenge Richie was a good way to tie in the last movie, but these killers just aren't very interesting. They weren't interesting before their reveals anyways, but I expected them to be more memorable once they were allowed to go crazy. I guess Wayne was alright. We get to see more of him and understand where he's coming from a little more. He's the best of the three. But even though the grand reveal was underwhelming, I don't mind it too much. This movie isn't about them, it's about the core four, and they're all incredibly likable here. I already liked them a lot in the last movie, but they're developed even further here. I feel for Sam. It sucks that everyone thinks she masterminded the events of Scream 5 just because she's Billy's daughter, but she also has to grapple with the fact that she enjoyed killing Richie in some dark way that she's afraid of. She's not evil, but has the capacity for it. That inner turmoil was very interesting to me. And it's actually pretty sick when she gets into Wayne's head by talking about Richie's death, and then her eventual brutal killing of him. Tara is also pretty good. She's understandable in her desire to live her own life without Sam always looking after her, and that all comes together in the end. Mindy is great, I loved all of her meta fourth wall jokes, and Chad is incredibly wholesome. I love that guy, but, not that I wanted Chad to die, but I already barely believed he could survive his injuries in the last movie. This time they really suspend my disbelief. Is he impervious to knives? Not even Dewey got stabbed this much. I really feel like someone important should have died here. It would have made this movie more impactful. It probably should have been Gail. I mean, she kind of had it coming, seeing how she was supposed to learn to stop sensationalizing these Ghostface murders, and explicitly said she wouldn't write a book about the last movie's events because that's exactly what the killers wanted. Only for her to write the book anyways, as this movie reveals. I would have thought her respect for Dewey would stop her from doing that, but I guess she just regressed back to her earlier self. That was kind of a bummer. There's no Sidney Prescott in this one, which is fine. The last movie was supposed to be a torch pass to the new cast anyways, so not having Sidney here is reasonable, even though the behind-the-scenes reasons why she isn't here is pretty lame. I do have faults with this movie, but it's all pretty nitpicky, and doesn't impact my overall feelings towards it. It's a great time! I guess you need to watch the earlier Scream films to fully understand everything here, but it's fine. Just have a big stab-a-thon this year! Go on! The Halloween that almost wasn't. What the fuck is this? I'll tell you what it is. It was a television special made for ABC that aired in 1979. We've got an old one on our hands here. Apparently, this special also aired on Disney Channel a few times, but that would not explain how I found this one. No, I found this bad boy because I was on the hunt for Halloween specials this year, and the plot of this one seemed pretty out there. Essentially, an evil witch is threatening to destroy Halloween, and Dracula isn't having it. This special is also known as The Night Dracula Saved the World. Oh my god, the stakes are high with this one. How is a witch going to destroy Halloween? It is a concept. They had better address this! Well, they didn't really. She's going to destroy Halloween in that she will not fly across the moon, and Halloween cannot officially start unless she does so. What the fuck? Why? Celebrate anyways! I guess you just don't fuck with tradition in Transylvania. Seeing that this is the case, Dracula brings in the boys to help solve this conundrum. Monster roll call! We got Igor, Drac's right-hand man, the Wolfman, who's kind of a bitch and can talk normally somehow, a zombie, a mummy, and Frankenstein's monster. Okay, that is just goddamn Herman Munster. That's literally him. You can't fool me. The witch is absolutely based. The first thing she does is start shit-talking everyone and announcing that she quits. Dracula tries to persuade her back to their side, but she's done with all the ugly jokes and being feared instead of loved. And worst of all, she does far more for Halloween than Dracula does, and yet he's the leader of the monsters. So, she gives Dracula a list of her demands that allow her and Dracula to co-own the season, or else Halloween is doomed. Dracula refuses to compromise, and so has to find a different way to make the witch fly across the moon. This is a very corny, cheap production, and I fucking live for it. The awkward jump cuts for teleportation, the little bat toy that's supposed to be Dracula, the Scooby-Doo chase scene, I love this! It's charming as hell, and it's very obvious that everyone is having a good time. Especially Dracula. Judd Hirsch is nailing it in the role. He has so many great lines and funny comebacks to everyone around him. I also love seeing him get on everyone's case because the monsters are doing merchandising shit so they're not scary anymore. But then he turns out to be a hypocrite because he also likes having t-shirts of himself in stores. This is the best line delivery ever, by the way.
Hiya, baby. It's me, Count Dracula.
What a Chad. My favorite character might actually be the witch, though. She has equally good comebacks, and she's absolutely right. She should get more credit for Halloween than Dracula. If it's her broom ride that somehow starts everything up. The witch almost decides that she isn't going to save Halloween, even in spite of Dracula giving in to her commands, because she would still be unloved. But when the children from the beginning of this special show up and beg her to save Halloween, she realizes one of them is dressed just like her, because she idolizes the witch. And so, seeing that she is respected, the witch decides to return to her duties. But Dracula still has to give her co-ownership of the holiday, and that was funny. So Halloween is saved! I don't know how Count Dracula saved the world in this journey. Our society does not collapse without Halloween, and he wasn't even the one that fully convinced the witch at the end. But fuck it! Everyone's happy! And hell, they're so happy, they may as well set a trend with a dance party ending! Get it, Drac! Get it, Drac! Go, mommy! Go, mommy! This special is fucking rad! Fuck yeah! I'm watching this every year now! Let's go! What are you waiting for? Go watch it! Watch it now! Yeah! Fred 2, Night of the Living Fred. Oh my god, this is embarrassing. I grew up as a big fan of Fred Figglehorn and his antics. I watched all his videos, bought this shitty toy, popped off when he showed up on iCarly, and eagerly awaited his big movie. And as I recalled it, I loved the Fred trilogy as it came out, and even sat through that Nickelodeon show he got. But shortly after that, I started to age out of Fred and didn't look back. But now seems like a good time to face the ghosts of my past. It's October after all, and Fred's second movie, which was always my favorite, happened to be Halloween themed. Sort of. I mean, we get a flashback to an event on Halloween, and the whole thing has a spooky theme to it, so it all works out, we're fine. This is getting in on the same technicality as Deadly Friend. Anyhow, now that I'm far removed from my Fred phase, do I still like this movie? Do I? What the fuck do you think? Obviously, yes. No! It was terrible! This movie couldn't even be saved by my nostalgia for it! First off, I hate Fred. I have to admit it. Fuck him. I completely understand now why everyone else hates him. He is ungodly annoying. You're supposed to kind of sympathize with him because he gets picked on, but he really doesn't have a lot of redeeming qualities to him. He's very judgmental, harsh, unreasonably arrogant, and has a knack for breaking the fourth wall and dropping some terrible jokes. I guess he tries to be a hero and kill a vampire to save people, but in doing so, he just causes havoc and makes the whole town go after Mr. Devlin, forcing him to move out. Then again, the twist ending reveals that he really was a vampire this whole time, so I guess Fred actually did save the town. You know what? I take it back. This train of thought has made me realize that Fred is a great protagonist and hero. By the way, Kevin is the GOAT. All of the actually decent jokes are handed to him, and the actor is killing it. Gotta love that me shirt. That's a Chadley move right there. And hey, you know what? Fred starts it this time. He comes over to Kevin's party, he snoops around, and he makes fun of Kevin's hair. Maybe Fred's the bully. Fuck off, Fred. I think your hair is just fine, Kevin. I take it back. I hate Fred again. Fucking asshole. This movie lives and dies on how you feel about Fred. So if you don't like him, you're basically fucked. Because this movie loves him and lets him have his badass moments of triumph, which I just hated. He's also so desirable that he ends up in a love triangle with Bertha and the new girl Talia. Ooh, I'm sure the shipping wars were brutal in the Fred community after this release. I always forget that Flo from the Progressive commercials is Kevin's mom, and I love Flo, so I love her here. And also, John Cena's back. He does pretty good. But what of the new characters brought into the Fred lore? Well, I think Devlin is pretty charming, in spite of the allegations. The dude playing him really hams it up, but he does it in a likable way that Fred himself is lacking. But with the twist ending in mind, did he kill Mrs. Felsen for that teaching position? How much of Fred's evidence was actually legitimate proof? I have to know! This movie has a few hit-or-miss dream sequences. Like, I enjoy the fly Devlin sucking Fred's blood and killing him, and just for the fact that I am almost certain everyone in the audience was embarrassed to be watching it, I love the WWE scene. But then we get to shit like the Twilight parody. Ooh, very funny, guys. That'll show 'em. Still, I mean, this would have just been a standard spooky kids movie to me if it weren't for Fred. Like, I actually think he personally destroys this whole thing. Because the concept of the vampire next door works pretty well, and there's clearly some creativity going on here. It's just that Fred is so unlikable and annoying that it gets in the way. Yes, I am now talking about the wasted potential of Fred 2, Night of the Living Fred. Maybe I'm starting to lose it. You don't gotta watch this one. Find something else this October. My unwavering support for Fred has come to an end with this rewatch. Bye, Ski! Ghost Watch. This here is one of my favorite types of found footage movies, where the footage is that of a live broadcast that went horribly wrong. This was released in 1992 on the BBC during Halloween night, and was treated as a real event, which actually fooled a lot of people and got people filing complaints. Just like that whole War of the Worlds radio broadcast that terrified everyone. I love any piece of horror media that can genuinely fool people into thinking it's all real. That's the best way you can do found footage in my opinion. That's why Blair Witch was so good. But beyond its reputation and ability to trick people, does this found footage movie actually have anything else to offer? Well, yeah, I think it does craft a compelling narrative. The focus of the broadcast is to search this haunted house and attempt to prove the existence of a ghost known as Pipes. All the while, people are urged to call in and talk about their own supernatural experiences. But, as the film goes on, we find out that Pipes is trying to perform a huge seance that bleeds into the broadcast and allows him to spread into the houses of everyone watching the program. So we start getting callers who are currently being tormented by Pipes, and eventually the entire studio erupts into chaos as Pipes possesses the host. It's great! I love how this isolated haunted house forms into something on a much grander scale, and it must have really terrified the people who thought this broadcast was real, since the narrative sets up that you're probably next. When the supernatural shit gets going, I like hearing about what's happening to people through their calls, like clocks mysteriously stopping at 9:30 and people being supernaturally drawn to their television sets. I also really liked how polite these characters were. I'm sure they were just trying to act like their true selves for realism, but it just creates a nice atmosphere before things go up into flames. And it made me feel pretty bad for Sarah, who I especially grew to like. Those kid actors also do a great job at seeming genuinely terrified at what's going on. Really, the extra steps to make this all seem believable is what makes this for me. Nobody acts unrealistic. Even the skeptic, who can be seen as a jerk, is pretty realistic to how people actually view paranormal phenomena. I mean, that's probably how I would react to all of this, just trying to find the rational explanation. I don't know, I just love things like this. If you want something similar to Ghost Watch, there's also WNUF Halloween Special, which does something similar but on a lower budget. That one's also great, and a little scarier if you're looking for that. But I still prefer Ghost Watch. It's got nice lore and better characters. And look! They don't really say much about Halloween in this special, but come on! It literally aired on Halloween night as a Halloween special! I think it earned a spot. If this sort of thing interests you, I highly recommend putting on Ghost Watch this Halloween. Halloween! Hell! Oh my god! This is an episode of Fridays the 13th, the series. No, it doesn't really have anything to do with Jason Voorhees. This show follows two cousins who inherit this haunted antique shop from their uncle, and the show is pretty much just them fighting off against people who want to use their haunted antiques for evil. It's actually not bad once you get past the fact that it has nothing to do with Friday the 13th. Hey, maybe Jason's mask was a haunted antique. Maybe this all takes place in the same universe. I don't know. We got a Halloween episode to cover today, so let's get into it. During Halloween night, when the line between the spirit world and our own is at its thinnest, Uncle Lewis sees his chance to return to the mortal world and gain a physical body again. But to pull that off, he'll need the help of his niece and nephew. I enjoyed this for the most part. It can get a little slow, and it's less interesting whenever we have to follow Mickey and Ryan, but everything with Uncle Lewis and Jack was great. Jack is my favorite. He's great as this mentor figure to the others, and he's very sweet. When he sees a child is lost, he tries to safely return her home, but this turns out to be a demon in disguise, and he gets trapped. But then we get this great scene of him manipulating two delinquents into freeing him by egging them on. I love it. And he ends up having personal stakes in this mission because he used to be friends with Lewis, and the two come face to face in the finale when Lewis is close to getting a new body. I really liked how Lewis rants about how he assumed nothing could last forever, but found out that hell really is forever, and he just can't stand the eternal torment, so he wants to escape. But he's too evil at this point and must be defeated. So the two get into a chant fight! Who can say their mystical chant first? Well, Lewis almost wins, but then realizes that it's not Halloween anymore, and he gets defeated by a terrible effect. Pretty anticlimactic. Still, I like this well enough. The Halloween vibes are definitely strong, lots of great decorations. It's just a little boring at times. There's not much else I can say about this. But if you're curious about the show, this episode is a good starting point. Halloween Free Season of the Witch? But didn't I already cover a Halloween movie? This is different. Michael Myers isn't in this one. We're fine. This movie centers around Dr. Dan, who is trying to solve the murder of one of his patients, only to unravel a much larger scheme that threatens to kill every child wearing this brand new silver shamrock mask. So, definitely a different tone than Michael Myers usually brings. Actually, the grand stakes and crazier premise is kind of what draws me to this movie. I like that the killers are all androids created by one eccentric man by the name of Colonel Cochran. That guy is great! Since he lives in a town filled with his robots, he barely gets to talk to any other humans, so you can sort of tell how excited he is to explain his entire plan to Dr. Dan. Also, the masks being able to melt your head into bugs and shit is great. I love that. Of course, the Silver Shamrock jingle is also quite the earworm. I can't get it out of my head. I'm a little torn on how I feel about our protagonist, Dr. Dan. On one hand, he seems to be a pretty neglectful father, and he hits on women like half his age. But also, he does have a good sense of justice. He really wants to solve the mystery of who killed his patient, despite that not being his job. And later, he does everything he can to stop Cochran and save as many kids as he can, especially making sure that he can save his kids first, which he does. I liked that. I would say he works fine in the end. And that whole ending where he's trying to stop the TV stations from airing the Silver Shamrock commercial that will activate everyone's mask is intense. I love it. He tries to convince as many stations to stop broadcasting it until he just can't anymore, and we're left with the downer ending that implies that a lot of children probably just died. It's a very unsettling way to end things off. I'm glad this movie has been receiving its fair due in more recent times. People have accepted that Michael Myers has nothing to do with this, so they can better respect it as its own fun horror movie. Honestly, it might actually be my favorite in this franchise, just from my preference towards more out-there plots with a grander scale. If you've been avoiding this movie all this time, now's your chance to give it a shot. Oh, and look! 12 more days till Halloween, Halloween, Halloween. 12 more days till Halloween, Silver Shamrock. A Nightmare on FaceTime! Strangely, it's a parody of The Shining rather than a parody of A Nightmare on Elm Street, despite the title. There are a few South Park Halloween episodes I could have chosen for this month, but this is definitely my favorite. Randy thinks he's made an incredible investment that's about to make him and his family rich. He bought a Blockbuster Video. Everyone can see how terrible this decision was except for him, and it leads to some incredible jokes. The way they parody The Shining here is so good, with Randy's gradual descent into madness over his failing business. It actually replicates the original movie pretty well, and having it all tie into how irrelevant physical media and video stores are these days is great. I have fond memories of going to video stores, and when things started to shift to streaming, I was kind of in denial about it, so unfortunately, I can relate to Randy's plight here. Probably my favorite joke in this whole episode is this underrated bit where, after stalking Sharon for a good bit, he just whips out this bullshit statistic.
According to industry experts, many rural areas don't have the bandwidth to support DVD quality video and streaming services and won't for years to come, making DVD rental still the best movie watching option.
I don't know why, that bit always gets me. I also love his shitty McDonald's order at the end. The way that's delivered is so good. The part of this episode that actually ties into Halloween isn't as strong, but it still works pretty fine. With Stan only being able to trick-or-treat through his phone and Cartman complaining about it the whole time. I did like how they treated his phone dying as Stan actually fucking dying. There are a few more good jokes in that plot, but I was more interested in what Randy was doing. This was before he took over the show, so he was still in his prime, and this is one of his best showings in my opinion. I have a great time whenever I put this on. I highly recommend you watch it if you're a fan of the show, or if you just have any nostalgia for video stores. It's a great time. Halloween is Grinch night! If you say so, you greedy son of a bitch. You already have a bangin' Christmas special. You want Halloween too? This little Halloween special was created as a prequel of sorts to the original How the Grinch Stole Christmas. That there is one of my favorite TV specials ever, so this special had a pretty tough act to follow. For what it's worth though, I had a decent time with this, so let's talk about it. All the Who's down in Whoville know that when sour sweet wind is howling, and green grumps are growling, that can mean only one thing. The Grinch is coming down from Mount Crumpet to unleash unearthly horrors onto mankind with his psychotic invention, the paraphernalia wagon. But a brave young man named Euchariah decides to challenge the Grinch head-on to save Whoville from another night of misery. My instinct is to first talk about the animation. For most of the special, it's pretty decent, it gets the job done, but once we step into the paraphernalia wagon, we get some great shit. I love these wacky-ass visuals, and some of the designs are actually pretty creepy looking. I love it! This whole sequence is the highlight of the special, and even comes with its very own creepy song to make the montage work. And on that note, this special does generally have fun music. Nothing really to write home about, but they're catchy all the same, and have that distinct Dr. Seuss charm to them. Since this is a prequel, the Grinch himself is still a dick to Max, which I just can't stand for. Max should get out of that abusive relationship. Oh wait, he does. The special ends with Max leaving the Grinch. Wait, okay, I know I was advocating for it, but that doesn't make any sense. This is a prequel, isn't it? I can only assume Max went crawling right back to the Grinch. That must have been depressing. The Grinch didn't treat him any better, he just went right back to the abuse. That's not funny. That's fucked up. Yeah, but this was a pretty good special. I don't think I'd put much thought into it if it weren't tied to the Grinch, because beyond the nightmare sequence, this is just alright. But that sequence is so good that it elevates the experience. I would recommend it. Hubie Halloween! Didn't this come out, like, right after Adam Sandler did Uncut Gems? He went right back to basics after that, my god. When this movie came out, I remember being in kind of a Adam Sandler high for whatever reason. It's all a blur to me now. Something about 8 crazy fights? I don't know. Well, this came out at the tail end of my high, and I remember enjoying it. But now that that high is worn off, how do I feel about Hubie Halloween? It sucks ass. I don't know what the fuck I was thinking. This is terrible. I mean, I can see why someone would enjoy it. Like, maybe you've just got to be in the right mood or something. But I guess I wasn't feeling charitable today because I was very annoyed watching this. Hubie Dubois is a kind, if slightly dim-witted man who likes to monitor this good city on Halloween each year to keep everyone safe. But everyone in town hates Hubie and picks on him all the time, until they eventually realize all that he's done for them, and they all feel like assholes for being mean to him. This is 8 Crazy Nights! Hubie is literally Whitey, even down to doing the stupid voice that's not real. It's literally a Halloween skin of 8 Crazy Nights. I'm not crazy. Anyways, despite their best efforts, I could not bring myself to like the Hubie character. He's just too obnoxious for me. All the yelling, the terrible jokes, no, I did not care for him. And this is one of those movies where if you don't like the main character, you're in for a rough time. Because this movie assumes I do. The humor in this movie is pretty much just gross out stuff the entire time. Look, he vomited. Stallone style! It wouldn't be an Adam Sandler movie without Kevin James showing up as an authority figure. But he's not the president this time, he's just a police sergeant who tricks Hubie into leaving him the fuck alone. You also got Rob Schneider, Steve Buscemi, the boys are back! I don't know why I saw this as a big, the gang's getting back together again, oh shit, type of thing, because these forces united typically leads to bad movies. And this is just another film in their catalog. It blends right in. If you like fucking bedtime stories, you'll probably like this. I mean, it definitely feels like the kind of movie that's more meant for kids than adults. Which, you know, fair enough. I don't think I am the target demographic for this movie anymore. I'm not a die-hard Adam Sandler fan, and I'm not a kid. So I didn't like it. That's all. Go away now. Halloween Town! This is a nostalgic one. I saw this movie a few times when I was a kid, but I haven't rewatched it in forever. So I figured this would be a good chance to rewatch it and see how I feel about it these days. Does it hold up? Or was there a reason I haven't gone back to it in all this time? It's complicated. But for those of you who haven't seen it, Halloween Town is about a girl named Marnie who is destined to be a witch, but has been closed off from the magical world by her mother, who wants nothing to do with that life. But when Marnie's grandma Aggie arrives on Halloween, she encourages Marnie to learn about her heritage and help save Halloween Town. Off the bat, I like a lot of the lore they build up here. With the history of Halloween Town and how the monsters shut themselves off from the humans because humans would hunt them down. Seeing Marnie learn about her heritage and getting into conflict with her mom about letting her embrace her powers is interesting. I just wish this stuff was in a movie that took itself more seriously. As you would expect from a fairly cheap Disney Channel original movie, it's pretty corny and hokey, and whenever they try to take things seriously, it's done pretty poorly. The acting isn't so great in these scenes. But there's still a lot of fun to be had with the corny stuff. The monsters in town, while they are all clearly just people in masks and makeup, are charming. I like a lot of the costumes, and some of them have fun personalities, like my goat, Benny the cab driver. I love that animatronic. Our main characters are alright. Marnie and Aggie were pretty likable, but I really didn't like Gwen. She's pretty antagonistic towards her own mother and children, and while I get that she just doesn't want to associate with Halloween Town because she thinks it's weird, I don't think it's fair to block off her children and prevent them from celebrating Halloween. I can't respect anyone who bans Halloween. Oh, also, hey Dylan, if you're not gonna help, how about shutting the fuck up, buddy? Complaining isn't gonna solve anything, you little shit! I hate Dylan. He's a fucking walking nerd stereotype. I liked the main villain for the most part. He kinda acts like Jim Carrey the whole time, and I like his motive. Pretty much, he thinks the monsters shouldn't have to hide from the human world, and would rather they all take it over instead of living in secret from them. But again, something that I think is cool in concept doesn't really translate to being cool in this movie, because they're not great at taking anything seriously. So the tonal issues are preventing me from really liking this movie, but for the fun monsters and creative environment, I enjoy it well enough, and appreciate this movie for what it is. Trick or Treat? Not that one. I chose the much less popular Trick or Treat. This is an episode of Tales from the Dark Side, a very underrated anthology horror series. I love anthology shows like this, and this is actually the first episode. Did it start strong, or are we about to witness some growing pains? Gideon Hackles is a rich old man with a twisted sense of humor. He documents and exploits any debt owed to him, and each Halloween he dares children to search his house for their parents' IOUs, just so he can terrify them. But this year, things are going to be different, and the only one being terrified will be Mr. Hackles himself. This episode is a ton of fun. It's the classic jerk gets their comeuppance story that occurs a lot in these anthology shows, and this was another satisfying tale. The character of Mr. Hackles is despicable and cruel, but they make sure that he's also entertaining to watch. Seeing him try to scare the kids with his narration and taking extreme delight whenever he succeeds is great. And I love when one of the kids almost finds the IOUs and he starts getting desperate to scare him. That was pretty funny. Like, I definitely wanted to see this guy get his just desserts, but I'm having a lot of fun watching him. Then, as we start to shift into horror, we get some great makeup. The witch looks perfect. That makeup is so good. And also, I don't know if it's just me, but she laughs just like Peridot from Steven Universe. I might be crazy. I don't know. It sounds like her. The witch is great. That's all that matters. She takes away Mr. Hackles' IOUs and money, having them fly around as he desperately tries to retrieve them. Though, I will criticize the acting on Mr. Hackles as this goes down. He has like zero energy during this when he should be freaking out. I don't know what happened here. He definitely should have freaked out when goddamn Satan shows up. I love the portal to hell here. It's great. And having the devil repeat Hackle's words when he was messing with the kids by saying, "You're getting warmer," is great as he sends Gideon to hell. I love that shit. And I love that the witch is pretty much the hero, as she triumphantly returns everyone's money while still cackling like a villain. They play some heroic music here, and I laughed my ass off. That paired with evil laughter is so good. I had a great time here. I definitely recommend this for any anthology fans, both this episode and the show in general. It's really good. Scary Godmother, Halloween Spooktacular! How many times can I get away with saying, "This is a very nostalgic one for me"? Obviously, yes, I'm covering a lot of Halloween media that I'm nostalgic for. You're adding nothing to the conversation, Max! Where was I? Scary Godmother. This used to air every October on Cartoon Network, if I recall correctly, but in the age of streaming, this movie doesn't naturally play for me unless I click it, and I haven't done that in forever. So now seems like a good opportunity to check in on the Scary Godmother. This movie was inspired by a series of books, and follows Hannah, as she wants to go trick-or-treating with her older brother, but he's a douchebag and makes her go into this haunted house. But in this house, she comes across her scary godmother, who teaches Hannah that monsters aren't all that scary. This is a very weird little special, but that's kind of what makes it so great. The animation is incredibly outdated. I mean, it literally looks like a PS1 cutscene, but it was charming. Seeing them try to do cartoony effects out of this animation was kind of hilarious. These kids are sometimes scarier than the monsters. Speaking of the monsters, I love all of them. Well, except for the werewolf, he can go fuck off forever. But all the other monsters hate him too, so it's alright. They have a skeleton who is in the closet, my god. And they have a vampire family that I enjoyed. Specifically, the dad vampire was very likable. He admits to having a hard time talking to people, and wants to seem cool to the others. That was a nice way to flesh out his character. I like him. But let's not forget about my favorite, Bugaboo. He is very sweet. I like how Hannah has the hardest time not being afraid of him, and he's sort of bummed about ruining the party. But Hannah is able to bond with him over their shared love for olives on pizza. Just seeing Hannah generally realize these monsters are actually very nice is sweet. It puts me in a good mood. I won't say all the jokes hit, they're mostly pretty corny puns, but there were a few that actually got me pretty good. I like that there is an option to sign away your soul when ordering pizza, and the best joke in the whole thing is when we hear the vampire out of context say, "So aside from that, Mrs. Lincoln, how did you enjoy the show?" That's fucking great. The scary godmother herself is very fun, even though I don't know why she randomly jump scares me and gives me a cooking tutorial. When all the monsters work together to scare Hannah's mean brother and his friends, it's great. I love that they let Hannah be the hero so they're all impressed with her. This is just a nice time. There's nothing to get mad about here. We just have this sweet story about a girl befriending some monsters. I'm glad I rewatched this one. I have to come back to it more often. When good ghouls go bad. I don't know what the fuck this is. I saw Christopher Lloyd was in it, and I was sold. I would follow that man into the depths of hell. And I chose this over watching Spirit Halloween, which also has him in it. Did I regret my impulsive decision? We'll find out, won't we? The town of Walker Falls refuses to celebrate Halloween after a child was killed inside of a kiln while making a statue. And they found a frightening message that claimed if they celebrate Halloween, they would be doomed. But when the statue is stolen, the dead begin to rise to retrieve it. This was pretty mid. I won't say this movie is bad, there are some things here that I liked, but for a majority of this film, I was bored out of my skull. The main characters, Danny and Dana, are so bland. We gotta follow these two characters the whole time? And they have a love subplot? Aw, come the fuck on! We also got this bully character who acts like a Bond villain the whole time, and it was not that funny. But he was a comedy legend next to his father. This character annoyed the shit out of me. The overacting is too much. He is not funny. He's just making stupid faces and yelling. The only character I actually did like was Uncle Frank. Christopher Lloyd brings a lot of charm to this character, and he was the only one who could not only be funny, but do his emotional moments too. His acting actually helped to make me enjoy the ending. It's actually kind of beautiful, and has some nice narration at the end there. But aside from the ending and any scene with Lloyd, this movie is just pretty boring, and even a little hard to follow at times. There isn't a ton to get into. I guess the zombies are a little fun. I like the design of the main zombie, that was pretty sick. There are good things in this movie, as I said. It just doesn't maintain itself very well. The Tale of the Midnight Ride. That's right, we're finally looking at an episode of Are You Afraid of the Dark? Like Goosebumps, this was an anthology horror show meant for kids, so you know I love it. The tale in this episode takes place on Halloween, so it's valid for the list. But will this tale be met with approval from the Midnight Society? Or more importantly, me? We'll find out. Ian is the new kid in school, and is getting into a relationship with a girl named Katie. But her jealous ex-boyfriend tries to prove that Ian is a wimp by scaring him with the legend of the Headless Horseman. But the fun stops when it turns out the legend is based in reality. This was an alright episode. It's not one of their best, nor one of their worst. It's just around the middle. I liked our protagonist Ian well enough, though he needs to stop calling Katie M'lady. That's how simp allegations get started. But yeah, he was eccentric enough. Though I can't believe he was actually scared by that prank from the bullies. My god, dude, how did you not see that coming? The main bully, Brad, is a bastard. They did a good job at making me hate him. He sort of gets his comeuppance when the real Headless Horseman scares him, but I forgot this wasn't the haunting hour, because I was expecting him to get fucking decapitated. Oh well. At one point, we see the ghost of Ichabod Crane, and the kids save him from dying this time. I don't understand this plotline. They explain that because they led Crane to the right location, the horseman is now after their heads. But how does that work? I guess the idea is that they're ghosts playing out an endless cycle, and if that gets disturbed, the horseman can do whatever he wants? Yeah, let's go with that. I don't know, Tucker, you're making me do a little bit of legwork on the story here. That's a rookie move! Step it up, you little bastard! Do you want to impress the Midnight Society or what? I guess the only other thing to talk about is the horseman himself. I thought he was alright. I like how he emerges from his own shadow. That was awesome. But otherwise, he's just your basic take on the character. Still, not a bad showing. I approve. Tucker, you're in! Who got Dee pregnant? Very scary indeed. This is the Halloween episode of It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia, which is one of the funniest shows I've seen. I don't know how they do it. All of the main characters are awful people, but they are so fun to watch. I never get tired of it. For today's purposes, they did an episode that takes place on Halloween. Or at least we constantly get flashbacks to one very scary Halloween night. When Dee reveals to the gang that she's pregnant and one of them is the father, they get into a panic and scramble to uncover the events of Halloween night to find out which one of them is the most likely to have done it. There are a lot of great gags in this episode. I love seeing everyone's different POVs of how the night went down, with Charlie initially believing he made out with the waitress, then finding out that he made out with Artemis, and then finding out that the waitress was never even at the party and he just bothered some random lady, who Mac later punched in the face. It's pretty funny to see all of their stories progressively become more humiliating as the truth unfolds. And I love the gag where Dee slowly transforms into a goddamn ostrich as we keep going on, since they all keep calling her a bird. That was fucking great. Also, Charlie freaking out about his costume being too sexy, so he swaps out with Dennis, who is dressed as Luigi! Oh my god! I can't believe we didn't get to see Charlie in uniform! They tell us it definitely happened! I wanted to see that shit! That's such an amazing coincidence. The true horror of this episode comes when it looks like it may have actually been Dennis who got Dee pregnant, which mortifies everyone. And the McPoyles are gross about it. My god, I fucking hate those guys. We find out that Dee made the whole thing up just to freak them out, so everything is fine in the end. Though Dee actually is pregnant, but none of the gang care anymore because they're not the father. this is just another really funny episode of the show. I don't have much to elaborate on besides saying pretty much all of the jokes were great. Give it a watch! Wacko! 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 I fucking hate this! Finally, a movie made by, for, and about people just like you. What the fuck are you on? You thought I would like this? Wacko is an 80s horror comedy? It feels more like Scary Movie, you know? All the way down to the jokes that have aged so poorly. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let's do this stupid plot synopsis I always start these videos with. Wouldn't want you, the audience, to be unaware of the general plot to Wacko. 13 years ago, a deranged killer in a pumpkin mask killed a bunch of kids with a lawnmower. And now it looks like the killer has returned to go on another killing spree. And there's also a completely separate horror movie in here somewhere about a father who's perving on his teenage daughter, but they think it's pretty funny. It's one of the big running gags of this little film. This movie is horny. It needs to calm down. Around every corner they've got a sex joke prepared. I mean, that's just sort of how spoof movies are, I guess. Just a bunch of lowbrow humor. This honestly fits right at home with the Scary Movie franchise, except instead of doing proper parodies of a bunch of horror films, they'll just list a bunch of movie titles and call it a job well done. The low budget of this movie does not help at all. Whenever they do something like, I don't know, a fucking musical sequence for no reason, it's just awkward to watch. I hate to focus on jokes that haven't aged well in spoof movies, but this one's pretty gross. A pervert flashes a girl, but she's so impressed that she decides to go out with him. Ugh, what are we doing here? That's all this film is. Sex joke, reference, repeat until we reveal that the detective character we've been following is actually the killer. Oh, I spoiled it. I guess you can't watch the movie anymore. I ruined the big mystery. I'm a klutz. I don't know, guys. It's kind of hard to talk about this movie, because it's pretty much one gag after the other, and there's only so many times I can say, this joke is bad. And hey, maybe you actually think these jokes are funny. I won't judge. There were a few jokes that got a laugh out of me, and I imagine if you're used to these sorts of movies, nothing in Wacko is going to shock you. I pretty much got what I expected from this movie, but I expected it to be terrible, so living up to the hype wasn't a goal it should have been striving for. Alright, let's move on. We are almost done with Maxtober. Come on, we're in the final stretch! Beetlejuice! Beetlejuice! I can't believe we're finally here. I have been wanting a sequel to Beetlejuice for the longest time. I grew up watching that movie, and as you should know, I love this entire franchise. So, I went into this sequel with high expectations. And you know what? It lived up to them. I genuinely really like this sequel, which is a rarity for me these days. Usually, comeback sequels to 80s movies I liked tend to come out fine. They're usually not terrible, and I enjoy them in the moment, but as I think about it more, I start to feel less favorable towards it. But I saw this movie when it came out, it is now the 30th of October, and the high has not worn off! I still love it! Let's talk about it. After years of stalking Lydia Dietz, Beetlejuice finally has an opening to unleash himself into the real world while escaping his revenge-fueled ex-wife. Off the bat, Michael Keaton is a gem. He steps right back into the role, and it's like he never left. He has all the same mannerisms as before, but he has a lot more screen time to do more gags. I love when he makes everyone sing MacArthur Park, and seeing his backstory was actually very interesting. I also want to shout out Kathleen O'Hara for her performance as Delia. She was so perfect here. Really, the whole cast did great. I think Jenna Ortega was a natural pick to play Lydia's daughter, and I like her subplot with Jeremy. I really wasn't expecting that twist. Lydia herself is great, though I felt so bad for her the whole way through because she was stuck with that abusive asshole. But that made it so much more satisfying when Beetlejuice forces him to reveal how he really feels, and then lets Lydia take her revenge. That was very cathartic. There are just too many good scenes to count. But in the midst of all this fun, I do think the plot suffers a bit. For one, I do like Dolores, but aside from her introduction scene, she doesn't do much, is kind of pointless, and gets defeated pretty easily. And she should have been missing a finger. The first movie sets them up so perfectly for that. Come on! Willem Dafoe's character also wasn't entirely necessary, but he was at least more of a defined character. I also think generally, these plot lines end a little too quickly. I thought Jeremy's reveal of being evil was pretty cool, and made him come off as pretty smart. But once he's served his purpose of getting Astrid to the netherworld, Beetlejuice sends that fucker to hell. That did get a laugh out of me though, so I'm not complaining too much. This movie focuses more on having a good time than telling an especially great story, and I think that's just fine. I wouldn't say the first film had an especially magnificent story. It's held together by great characters and amazing visuals. And this movie keeps up the trend. Only, I would argue it's a little more fun with a greater focus on Beetlejuice and Lydia, who I think are more interesting characters than Adam and Barbara. I've really been struggling to decide if I actually prefer this to the original movie, because they're very comparable in my eyes. But if I have to lean one way or the other, I might actually be giving the edge to this movie. They both have advantages over each other, but I just genuinely have more fun here. You really need to watch this if you like the original. I think it's an amazing time. I'm so happy this movie broke the curse of mid-sequels to 80s classics. We've been drowning in those for a while. I don't even want to think about the last time I got burned. No! Hocus Pocus is my favorite Halloween movie. I love the music, the atmosphere is perfect, I love the tale of Zachary Binks, and of course, the Sanderson sisters themselves are legends. I watched this movie every October, and I was so excited when I heard we'd finally get Hocus Pocus 2 after all these years. I don't know why I was expecting it to be 100% faithful to the original. I just kinda had hope. You know, that's all I can do is hope for the best. But that just made it much worse when it came out and turned out to be terrible. Here's the thing though, I was in such denial about it that after seeing this for the first time, I actually tricked myself into liking it. That lasted a few hours before I came to terms with the fact that after all these years, I was handed this disappointment. And now I'm gonna spend all Hallows Eve sending this movie back to hell where it belongs! Teenagers Becca and Izzy resurrect the Sanderson sisters after lighting the black flame candle. But this time, instead of sucking the lives out of the children of Salem, the witches have a new plan to turn Winifred into an all-powerful witch with the use of a forbidden spell that has dire consequences. First of all, who are these new characters? They're so boring. I can't tell you a thing about them besides one of them has witch powers. They're all written the same, and the humor in this movie is just so modern. I don't know, it's that annoying, sarcastic, and self-referential humor. The mayor is very annoying. The guy who teamed up with Billy, I forgot his name, he was fucking annoying. I couldn't take it. And I know this is just the superfan in me saying this, but where was my boy Max? Or Danny? Or Allison? There are other characters in the original besides the Sandersons, you know? No Ernie, no Ice, no nothing? We could have followed Max and Allison's kids, I don't know. I would have cared a little more about our protagonist that way. Maybe we could have brought Binks back, make it a whole reunion. I don't know, they gave us Billy, but he kinda just fucks around and does nothing the whole time. I guess this movie has enough remember the first movie scenes in it that we don't actually need any legacy characters popping up. Look at that! It's the calming circle! Remember? It's Come Little Children! Oh, fuck! Hey, how are we gonna play Come Little Children but not play I Put a Spell on You? What the fuck? Instead we got One Way or Another. Fuck off! For what we do have, I guess I can say the Sanderson sisters themselves have a few good moments. I didn't mind seeing them stroll through a Walgreens and try to eat the beauty products. That seems in line with the first film and how they were dumbfounded by modern society. But with the writing quality as low as it is, The sisters also have a lot of really lame jokes that I hated. And just generally speaking, they feel like much less of a threat now. This whole movie just feels so watered down. The original Hocus Pocus had a certain edge to it. I mean, we literally see the Sandersons kill a child on screen for the first act. But everything here is so sanitized and corporate. I guess to be more in line with Disney's marketable image. To the point that they try to make the Sanderson sisters redeemable. They're child killers! Steer into that! Make them awful! Instead, we're meant to sympathize with them for how actually they were the victims all along because the town of Salem was very mean to them. And now, suddenly, Winifred actually cares about her sisters and sacrifices herself to be with them again. Spoilers. This completely goes against her character in the original. Sarah and Mary like Winnie, but she hates them, and even criticizes Max for being foolish enough to sacrifice himself for his sister.
What a fool to give up thy life for thy sisters.
But because Disney wants us to love the Sanderson sisters, now they all have a strong sisterly bond that cannot be broken, and Winnie is a big softie deep down. She thanks the main characters for helping her reunite with her sisters. Oh, gag! I kinda get it, they wanted to flesh out the Sandersons more, but what happened to the threat? They were goofy in the original, but they still had moments to show that they could actually be threatening and were genuinely evil. There's none of that here. They got their asses saved by a Roomba. As a big fan of Hocus Pocus, this just really disappointed me. I don't think Disney really understood why so many people liked the original. It wasn't just the Sandersons being goofy, it was the atmosphere, humor, and compelling story. There's none of that here. Or at least, I didn't like it here. They certainly tried to add humor, it was just terrible. Maybe you like it, I don't know. Apparently they're making a third movie, so perhaps other Hocus Pocus fans did get into it. Good for them. Oh well, I still have the original. I can't be too mad. If you like the original, it's possible you'll like this movie. But I wouldn't recommend it myself. That's it! The 31 days of my curse are up! And that was my unfinished business, so I guess it's time for me to move on. So long, everyone. Ah! Whoa. And would you look at that? The 31 Days of Maxtober has brought me back to life! I knew there was something magical in those movies. Well, now that I'm not dead, I guess I really do have to keep working. Perhaps next year we can experience this again. Until next time, happy Halloween!